Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El Rom.
And I'm Shanna Fold.
In our top story, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has tested negative for the coronavirus. Nevertheless, he has entered isolation after the husband of one of his aides tested positive for the disease. Netanyahu continues to lead the Jewish state through this difficult time. In other news, there has been major progress in the creation of a unity coalition. Netanyahu's political rival, Benny Gantz, announced that he would join the prime minister in forming a government. Israel Now News will keep you updated on this developing story.
Israel's national airline El Al has suspended all commercial flights to and from the Jewish state. The airline has already put more than 5,500 employees on unpaid leave, and it warned that it will be forced to make further concessions. The national carrier is, however, continuing to repatriate stranded Israelis from countries around the world and is operating cargo flights to bring in medical supplies.
We reported last week on the IDF units and teams of Israelis working around the clock to turn existing materials into life-saving medical equipment. This week, we're happy to reveal that there's been a major breakthrough in this field. Representatives from Microsoft Israel, the First Robotics League, Ichilav Medical Center, Magen David Adom, and the Israeli Air Force's Elite 108th Unit have created a solution to the worldwide respirator shortage. The teams, led and supervised by the Israeli Air Force, have designed a respirator that can be produced in bulk in laboratories. The developers explain that this solution could allow the mass production of hundreds of breathing devices every day. The instructions to manufacture the open-source respirator will be available to the public free of charge, and the designers hope that their technology will help save many lives.
Israel's enemies have not taken a break from their campaign to destroy the Jewish state. Terrorists in Gaza resumed rocket fire onto civilian communities in southern Israel. This following a massive aid package from Jerusalem to the residents of Gaza in the wake of the coronavirus crisis. Still, Israelis are being terrorized by militant groups in the Hamas-run enclave. And in a related story, the Israeli Defense Forces shot down a drone operated by the Iranian proxy army Hezbollah. The unmanned aircraft infiltrated Israeli airspace from Lebanon. IDF soldiers retrieved the drone, and a senior officer said the Israeli army remains on high alert on a number of fronts.
The Israeli rideshare company Via Transportation has secured $400 million in investments and announced that it's valued at $2.25 billion. Via, whose research and development center is located in Tel Aviv, designed a dynamic transportation system using algorithms to predict ride-sharing needs and then creates appropriate carpooling routes. Via already operates in 100 communities worldwide, and the company's co-founders say they are proud to apply their technology and operational expertise to assist cities with optimizing transit networks, transporting essential workers, and delivering goods and services to individuals in need, especially during this emergency period.
A prominent Italian artist has unveiled his newest painting, a revival of an age-old anti-Semitic lie known today as a blood libel. In 1475, the Jews of Italy were blamed for the disappearance of a Catholic child. Accusations of his death being due to a Jewish ritual began to spread through Italy like wildfire. Several Jews were executed after they were falsely accused of using the boy's blood to make matzah, or unleavened bread, for Passover. This evil libel has followed the Jewish people throughout history and has been used as an excuse to justify anti-Semitism.
Leaders from the United Nations and the United States are praising Israel for its cooperation with the Palestinian Authority during the coronavirus crisis. But PA officials continue to incite the Arab population to violence. We've reported extensively on the aid and medical support Israel has given to the PA and Gaza, but the Palestinian leadership is set on making sure that Arabs continue to view Israel as the enemy. Recently, the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority publicly accused Israeli soldiers of intentionally spreading the coronavirus throughout the Arab sector. He's joined by senior members of Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah Council, who falsely accused IDF soldiers of quarantining Arabs so that Jews can steal their lands.
Saudi Arabia intercepted 2 ballistic missiles fired by Iranian-backed rebels. The rockets were launched toward the cities of Jizan and Riyadh and were shot down by American-made Patriot missile defense systems. The projectile fired on the capital, Riyadh, was intercepted over a residential neighborhood. 2 people were reportedly injured by falling shrapnel. A Saudi civil defense spokesperson accused Iranian Revolutionary Guards of working with the Houthi rebels and stressed that Iran poses a grave threat to Saudi Arabia.
Israelis believe that prayer is the most essential thing, especially in times of crisis. In the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, governments are deciding which services and businesses are considered essential, and Israel has declared that prayer is paramount. When Jerusalem ordered a shutdown of all non-essential businesses, it made a point to say that people can still pray outdoors in groups of less than 10 at a distance of 2 yards apart. Well, these restrictions have since been tightened, and Jews are now asked to pray alone. But Israelis are resilient and have appointed specific times during the day for all people to pray as one from the safety of their own homes, asking for mercy, healing, and for the end of the coronavirus.
Karen Hayesod, the United Jewish Appeal, helped to fund the immigration, or aliyah, of nearly 1,000 Jews to Israel during the month of March, despite the global pandemic. Karen Hayesod, in cooperation with the Jewish Agency, made special arrangements for these new immigrants, or olim, as they're called in Hebrew, and is providing them with the support they need during their mandatory 14-day quarantine and transition to their new homes.
We're sad to report that Joseph Newman, one of the victims of the stabbing attack in Muncie, New York, has succumbed to his injuries. Newman and 4 other Jewish men were brutally attacked during a Hanukkah party last December. The machete-wielding attacker was found in possession of anti-Semitic propaganda. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo announced that he will rename the domestic terrorism law in honor of Newman, and he called on the New York State Legislature to endorse the measure, saying we owe it to Mr. Newman, his family, and the entire family of New York to get it done now.
The Fine Arts Museum in the Swiss city of Basel has agreed to compensate the family of a Jewish art collector. Kurt Glaser was the director of Berlin's art library until he was forced out. In 1933, Glaser auctioned his collection of more than 100 works by artists such as Edvard Munch, Marc Chagall, and Henri Matisse. Despite repeatedly denying any wrongdoing, leaked documents proved that the museum knew it had taken advantage of Glaser when they paid the desperate art collector less money than he deserved. The museum claims to have reached a fair settlement with the family, who also insisted that Glaser's collection be displayed at the museum in 2022.
Christians around the world and in Israel continue to support Jews in need despite the coronavirus crisis. The organization Christians for Israel is working to feed Jews in more than 100 locations throughout Ukraine. Coronavirus restrictions have forced many soup kitchens in that country to close, so the group, which is based in the Netherlands, has taken it upon itself to deliver food to Jews in distress. Meanwhile, in Israel, the Christian Friends of Israeli Communities in Judea and Samaria donated 110,000 shekels worth of food vouchers to needy families in Samaria. Bridges for Peace, which already feeds 21,000 Holocaust survivors, new immigrants, children, widows, and orphans every month, has been given permission by the Israeli authorities to continue their vital work of providing food and assistance to elderly Holocaust survivors.
Prince Harry is facing some ugly backlash for inviting wounded IDF soldiers to his upcoming Invictus sporting event. The Duke of Sussex founded the competition, which holds 10 categories of sporting events for injured or sick armed service personnel and veterans. A few years ago, members of the Jordanian and Iraqi armies participated in the games, but when the Invictus Games Foundation recently extended an invitation to Israeli soldiers, Harry began to receive vicious criticism from his country's Muslim community. An Arab journalist in the UK accused the British prince of provoking Arabs by inviting Israelis.
2 lone soldiers from the United States have graduated a combat soldiers training course with the support of their families on a live video stream. Lone soldier is the term the Israeli army uses for the men and women who enlist in the IDF from other countries. They usually have no immediate family living in Israel. Omer Levy and Oria Zisso are childhood friends from California who decided to immigrate to Israel together and join the Israel Defense Forces. The travel restrictions instituted as a result of the rapidly spreading coronavirus prevented their families from physically attending their recent graduation, but modern technology allowed them to watch the ceremony online.
Israel has employed a unit of special needs IDF soldiers to pack coronavirus test kits. The Israeli Health Ministry has called on these special and uniformed soldiers to replenish kits to restock the hospitals and clinics. The commander of this unit said his team is the best suited to this task, and he credited them for their diligent nature, patience, and persistence. Lieutenant Colonel Kobi Malka said that these soldiers have special skills that allow them to be more industrious and efficient at this job, which requires meticulous and repetitive work over very long hours.
The Jewish state welcomed 72 new immigrants from Ethiopia last week. In an exciting series of events, the new Olim were airlifted to Israel just hours before the African nation closed its borders. Karen Hayesod has been working tirelessly to reunite the families of this lost tribe of Israel. The latest arrivals to the Holy Land are just a small portion of the over 8,000 Falish Mur waiting to return to Zion.
Jessica Meir, the NASA astronaut who is currently in orbit serving as a flight engineer, delivered a warm message to Israel from outer space. Meir sent a picture of the Jewish state which read, "Gazing down at the city of Tel Aviv, where my father was raised, I take to heart one of his most uttered expressions. This too shall pass." Wise words to remember in good times and bad.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wished Christians, Jews, and Muslims happy holidays and encouraged them to celebrate in accordance with the most recent health guidelines. Christians and Jews are gearing up to observe Easter and Passover, while Muslims will begin their month-long holiday of Ramadan later this month.
Jews around the world are preparing to celebrate the Passover holiday, which begins at sundown on Wednesday. This week-long biblical festival commemorates the liberation of the Jewish people from slavery in Egypt, as told in the book of Exodus. The Passover story details 10 biblical plagues, which afflicted the people of Egypt, culminating with the death of the firstborn son. The Israelites were commanded to put lamb's blood on their doorposts so that the angel of death would pass over their homes. This year, the symbolism of the Passover holiday is even more meaningful to Jews and Christians around the world, as most of us are confined to our homes, praying for this modern plague to pass. We at Israel Now News would like to wish all of our viewers a healthy and happy holiday. Chag Kasher v'Sameach. Well, that concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Zev Ornstein. He's the Director of International Affairs for the City of David. Zev, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Zev, tell our viewers a little bit about what is the City of David.
The City of David is where Jerusalem began. It is the historic site of biblical Jerusalem. When you think of the Bible, King David, King Solomon, the prophets, they weren't hanging out in the old city of Jerusalem. They were hanging out in the City of David, just outside the walls of the old city.
Well, this is a mind-blowing discovery that was just pretty recent in the last 20, 30 years, that actually King David's palace was not in the old city. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Up until 2005, people thought, where's King David hanging out? Must be somewhere in the old city, maybe the Tower of David. King David was never at the Tower of David, right? 2005, an archaeologist named Dr. Eilat Mazar comes up with a theory that she believes she's made a very strong case for, that the palace of King David, the palace of the Davidic dynasty, is actually just outside the walls of the old city, in the City of David, adjacent to the Western Wall.
And you've made some incredible discoveries since figuring that out. You found the seals of some of the people from the books of the prophets. Can you tell us about some of that?
Yeah, what's amazing is that when you walk through the City of David, you find inscriptions dating back to the time of King Hezekiah, seals with the names of biblical officials, including two who wanted to kill the prophet Jeremiah. On the one hand, you have the faith, the Bible, which is saying, here's what happened. On the other hand, you have the science, the archaeology, which is showing not simply as a matter of faith, but a matter of fact that this is real. They were real people, real events. The connection of Jews and Christians to Jerusalem, to the Bible, is real.
What's interesting is that people are starting to understand that the prophecies of the Bible are real, so that you can predict the future by the prophecies of the Bible. But a lot of people don't understand that it's also historically accurate. How important was the Bible in finding David's city?
Absolutely. You have archaeologists who, when they go to dig in the City of David or other places in the Holy Land, well, where are you going to dig and how are you going to interpret what you find? And so on the one hand, archaeology is a science, And in that science, the Bible is in your toolbox. That when you dig down to a certain level, you start to find certain structures or inscriptions, say, wait a minute, here's what we're finding. Here's what the Bible says is happening. Well, do they match up? And if they do match up, well, there you go. You could say, well, here's what the Bible says. Here's what we're finding. And it gives the archaeologists a way to understand what they're discovering dating back 2,000, 3,000, almost 4,000 years in the city of David.
You know what's incredible is that in the last year alone, you found the Pilgrimage Road. Tell our viewers, what is the Pilgrimage Road?
So the Bible tells us that 3 times a year, Passover, Pentecost, Tabernacles, all of Israel has to go up to the temple. The historian Josephus says that 2,000 years ago, you would have had nearly 3 million people on Passover going up to the temple on the Temple Mount. Now, of course, before you can go up to the temple, you have to purify yourself. You have to go to a mikveh, a ritual bath. In 2004, as a result of a busted sewage pipe, archaeologists discover the ancient pool of Siloam, with deep significance to Christians and Jews alike. And they said, if we now know where the pool of Siloam is, and we know where the temple stood on the Temple Mount, how did these millions of pilgrims 2,000 years ago get from the pool up to the temple? They widen the excavation, and what do they discover? They discover the actual road, the pilgrimage road that our ancestors, yours and mine, Josh, and also the many millions of visitors at home, Jews and Christians alike, who their ancestors, when they went on pilgrimage up to the temple, this is the actual road they walked on. Not a road near here, not stones that looked like these, the actual pilgrimage road.
You know, I got a sneak peek of the Pilgrimage Road, and while I was there were Christian leaders there, and they were weeping. Why is this so significant to Bible-believing Christians?
I mean, how many places can you go where you can say, the people that are so central to my faith, in this case as Christians, the individuals or individual that is most significant to who I am and what I believe, that I know for a fact he was there. Not because I believe it, but because archaeologically, historically, this is where these people were walking 2,000 years ago. Of course, 2,000 years ago, Jesus was Jewish. He was walking along the pilgrimage road, going down to the Pool of Siloam, purifying. Again, the Pool of Siloam has significance to Jews and Christians alike in both the Hebrew Bible, the Christian scriptures. He was then walking up along the pilgrimage road to the temple on the Temple Mount. Right? It was a real place. The Pool of Siloam is 100% the Pool of Siloam in the city of David that's being excavated. The Pilgrimage Road is 100% the Pilgrimage Road that's being excavated. Of course, we know the Temple Mount is the same Temple Mount. And the Pilgrimage Road links them all together.
You know, when I started going to Ir David many years ago, I was like the only guy there. Now it's crazy how many people are coming. How does it become such a big tourist spot?
The words of the Bible are coming to life. When you're in the place where the Bible happened, the words of the Bible come to life, and you have billions of people around the world who want to connect to that, who want to not just read their Bible at home in whether it's some country in Europe or the United States or wherever, Africa. They actually want to connect to it in a physical way. And when you visit the Holy Land, when you visit Israel, and more specifically when you visit Jerusalem and the city of David, biblical Jerusalem, where Jerusalem began, the Bible comes to life. You walk through the excavations, you see the seals, the inscriptions that are being discovered, say, wait a minute, here's what I believe. Here's what the archaeologists are finding. It's not just a matter of faith, it's a matter of fact. My connection is real. You could see it, you could touch it, you could walk on it. And how many places can you go in the world that bring your faith to life in such a real, tangible way?
What's going to happen in the next 10 years? What do you see in the future for Ir David, the city of David?
You know, in Isaiah it talks about Jerusalem being a house of prayer for all nations. We finished this past year with about 800,000 visitors. Why? Because once the excavation of the Pilgrimage Road is completed, you are going to have people from all over the world. You're going to have billions of Christians, Jews, people of all faiths and backgrounds who want to walk in the footsteps of their ancestors, who want to walk along the biblical superhighway. And in a couple of years' time from now, it's going to be possible. Something that our ancestors could have only dreamed about in a few more years' time is going to be as easy as buying a plane ticket.
There are literally tens of millions of people watching this show, Zev. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
You know, you can go to Egypt and visit the pyramids. You can go to the Roman Colosseum in Rome. But how many places can you go where you can literally walk in the footsteps of your ancestors in a place that 2,000 years ago the people walked on the Pilgrimage Road? They were worshiping the same God, speaking the same language, believing the same things that we believe today. This is not history. This is a continuation of the story. The Pilgrimage Road in the city of David from the Pool of Siloam to the Temple Mount represents the most significant half mile in the world for the Judeo-Christian heritage. And this is something that in a few years' time, you will be able to experience for yourself. Come visit us in the city of David.
Thank you, Zev, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, the Return to Zion with Karen Hayesod.
Shalom, and welcome to the Return to Zion with Karen Hayesod. I'm Sam Grundwerg, World Chairman of Karen Hayesod, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. Aliyah is crucial to the success of the State of Israel. Without the constant flow of new immigrants who come from the four corners of the earth, the deserts would not have bloomed, the cities would not have been built, and Israel would not be known as the startup nation. Listen to how God has brought His people back to Israel.
Me and my family always prayed to come to Israel because it's a home, it's our home. 10 months ago, I made Aliyah with my sister. We are living together in Haifa. I'm worrying about my family because the situation in Ukraine now really terrible.
The past decade and a half has witnessed a frightening upsurge of worldwide anti-Semitism, unparalleled since the 1930s. Across Europe, incitement, desecration of Jewish institutions, attacks on Jewish property, and acts of terror, including murder, are striking fear into Jewish communities. From London to Berlin, Brussels to Copenhagen, Jews are being harassed, assaulted, and murdered. The situation is particularly intolerable in France and in Ukraine. In France, violent crimes against Jews have become commonplace.
Avec la multiplication des actes antisémites en France, donc déjà j'ai peur pour moi, mais j'ai aussi peur pour ma famille, pour ma femme, pour mes enfants plus tard.
In eastern Ukraine, over 1 million people have been displaced. In the escalating chaos and lawlessness, Jews have once again become scapegoats, with many anti-Semitic incidents reported.
When I was in school, my classmates told me that, oh, you're Jewish, it's not normal in Ukraine, why you are Jewish? It was very hard for me to speak with them, to describe every time what I do in Ukraine and why I'm Jewish.
I will give to you and your descendants after you the land of your sojourning, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession. But Israel has always been the homeland of the Jewish people. Throughout their 2,000-year exile, the Jews prayed daily to return to the land of Israel. In 1917, Great Britain issued the Balfour Declaration. In 1920, Karen Hayesod was established to raise funds for this purpose. Since the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, Karen Hayesod has helped bring 3.5 million olim to Israel from the four corners of the earth.
This is Bible prophecy come into fulfillment. It's not just my heart, but I can feel the heart of Abba Father. Abba Father in heaven is so pleased to see His children who are scattered all around the globe is coming back home.
From India to Africa to Europe, record-breaking numbers of Jews are eager to come home. Aliyah rose dramatically in the past year, hitting a 10-year high despite the security threats that face Israel. Karen Hayesod operates in 45 countries throughout the world. The Karen Hayesod law, passed by the Knesset in January 1956, grants the organization a unique fundraising status. In close coordination with the government and the Jewish Agency for Israel, and in partnership with the global Jewish community and Friends of Israel, Karen Hayesod promotes Aliyah and other national priorities. We need you, dear friends, to be our partners in this noble mission of helping the people of Israel return home before the window of opportunity slams shut and live safely in its secured homeland. Karen Hayesod, with your generous assistance, has redoubled its efforts to facilitate every Jew who wishes to fulfill the biblical prophecy. Friends of Israel, the Holy Land and its people needs you now. He will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the four quarters of the earth.
Let's bless Israel together.
Now's the time for you to get involved. Assist Karen Hayesod to raise the necessary funds in order to bring Jews yearning for their homeland back to Israel. Your donation can help fulfill the biblical prophecy today. To donate and get information, visit our website at www.khisrael.org.
The entire corona strategy in 2 minutes. What you see here is the famous graph. You see the daily pace of new corona positive people. And as we all know, it's an exponential growth, so it suddenly takes you by surprise. What we want to do, and what you see, the red line over here, is the national capacity of intensive care unit rooms and breathing machines, our capacity. What we ultimately want to do is ensure that the number of patients is always beneath the number of capacity that we have. So there's no situation where people come to the hospital and don't have enough breathing machines. So what do we want to do? We want to flatten the curve. How do you do it? First, you educate the public to social distancing. So by the education alone, we flatten the curve. This is education. Second thing what we do is we go through all cases and we investigate and tell everyone who's been around a corona positive person to go into self-isolation. This also flattens the curve a bit, okay? This is investigations. The third thing we do is massive public isolation, what we're seeing across the world. It comes at a very heavy cost, but it works. It flattens the curve to a certain degree. This is massive isolation, massive national isolation. The next thing we do is massive testing. We test everyone who might have the coronavirus, and then we send them to full isolation. This is an extremely effective measure which helps flatten the curve. This is called testing. Now, what you also want to do, you want to increase the national capacity to receive new corona patients. So for example, if this is your original limit, you get more beds, get more machines, you train the staff, and you hit this line over here. So if you've managed to flatten the curve and to increase the capacity, it means that no patient will arrive at the hospital without a bed.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El Rome.
And I'm Shanna Fold, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all your Israel updates.